within them to want to get engaged, for them to want to get into the action. Father, we ask God that you continue to bless our founder and president, Reverend Sharpton, as he leads us. Continue to bless us as we are gearing up for August 28th. We ask God that you just be in the midst. We thank you for what you're doing and what you're getting ready to do. It is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen, amen. And I'm going to turn it over to Kyra Valley and, of course, Dominique Sharpton-Bright, our co-chair, and our VP of Huddle, Mr. Pinnacle Garcia. And you guys can introduce the speakers tonight, and let's get this conversation started. Where's Kyra? Oh, there you go.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Huddle. Love Huddle. Always love being here. So thank you for the opportunity to just have this idea and bring this conversation together. To introduce some of our speakers, I know we have Ty Hobson Powell with us. He is a lead organizer with 51 for 51 here in DC, super dynamic speaker, activist. Chelsea Miller is also joining us. She is one of the co-founders of Freedom March NYC and one of the co-founders of We Believe, which is the fastest growing pipeline for women, girls of color of its kind. So also an activist in her own right. Angela Myers has joined us. She is with NAACP's chapter in Minneapolis, where she serves as second vice president and is a young activist in this space. So we all, as young activists, are growing up at a time and calling ourselves in a moment where we are doing activism both in the streets, but also on social media. And then I see that Alea Eastman has joined. She is an executive council member with Team Enough from the Brady campaign to end gun violence. And she's also a Parkland shooting survivor and a co-founder of Concerned Citizens in DC, where she's been leading protests for like months nonstop. So she's very dynamic. She's 19, which is wild. We also have Paul Prasad, who will be bringing our like strategic comm side here. He grew up in NAN and is now working at Mercury Public Affairs. So we're really glad to have him on the line as well. And I'll turn it over to Dominique. Dominique. I think we can go into the first question. So like I mentioned before, like we are all on this call young activists. Of course, Huddle is a group of young organizers in New York and now around the country since we've been able to go virtual, and being led by Ashley Sharpton and Dominique Sharpton, who grew up in the movement. So the first question is, and this is for anybody who cares to jump in. All right, can y'all hear me? Yeah, okay, good. I was getting some feedback. So at this moment, we've seen a lot of folks be held accountable through something that's kind of been termed as cancel culture, right? And I guess my question for folks who, it's hard to hear me.
It's because one of the participants kept unmuting themselves. Please stop unmuting yourselves. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, in this moment when we are activating on the streets, we're looking to make sure that we're holding our elected officials to account, people in power to account. We're using our voices and amplifying those voices, making sure that we're being heard. How do we see ourselves within the continuation of the civil rights movement? And how do we see cancel culture kind of playing into that? Do we see it as a form of boycott, or do we see it as something else entirely? And yeah, I'll turn it over to whoever wants to jump in. I know Angela and I have kind of spoken about this a bit before. So Angela, if you'd like to take a crack at it.
Yeah, no, I definitely would. I think that, so what we have as cancel culture now, from what I kind of have seen from social media, from, kind of like 2015 kind of times till now with like the Mute R. Kelly movement or other type of cancelings, and especially out of like the Me Too movement, canceling particularly like men of power served as a way to protect other women, right? And it served as a way to protect also different groups. So I work in a space where there's a lot of activist groups, but there's also a lot of toxic, hurt people in these activist groups that are perpetuating pain onto other people and who are sexual abusers, who use, the access point of the group to sexually abuse other activists, things like that. And in that case, I see that as a way to protect the group, protect the mission, protect the people within the organization. But also I think how it's kind of like it's blown up in a lot of ways out of context, or, also kind of like where people who are perceiving, sometimes toxic instances, hurtful instances as, okay, we're going to cancel this person. And they feel they've been hurt. They've been hurt by that person, maybe from a personal instance, but the group doesn't necessarily need to be a part of that. Maybe that is something that is more relational. So there's different avenues I see sometimes, and sometimes it's like the levels are like someone just said something hurtful and that should be addressed and someone should be held accountable for saying something hurtful. But then there is a level where was on the Twitter and things like that, there are instances of men sexually assaulting women, and like that was like the level like of what canceling was, what canceling should be it's really for the protection of women, trans folk, people in a group. But it has kind of like blown up strangely. And also when thinking about like, I don't know, how you all feel about the conversation around Kamala Harris, but, kind of how it's kind of blown up to almost cancel Kamala. And that's strange to me because she is, a political person where you can still use your vote. You can still, in a lot of ways, talk about someone's political history and hold them accountable. And like also talk about the pros and the cons, and in a way where you can still vote, you still have a say. And what I saw for cancel culture was people who were taking back a power of saying to keeping people out of a group, out of a space. And so that's kind of the line that I saw changing, and now it's kind of being a little bit not what the initial intent was. So I don't know if that helped open it up.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Angela. I think that there are different levels to the cancel culture as we see it now. I think it's almost weaponized now as to, when it first started, it was to protect people from other harmful people, a way to protect, or a way to actually like stop the economic flow of that person, so let's not do business with this person because X, or let's not, have this person produce our movies because Y. And I think now the cancel culture has become a little microwavable, a little bit easier to just cancel people off of the notion that you don't, like something they said, or kind of, they made a mistake. And we need to see and put things in context, especially when we talk, when we're talking about not only people in power, people in entertainment. It's just kind of like, if we're just basing, a lot of us, younger folks are glued onto Twitter and kind of see the messaging that's going on, and we just have to be careful to one, use our voice in the right way, and just know that, the cancel culture can't be as easy to adapt, in every situation. And so I think that you're right, like, as to like their different levels.
I think, just to chime in really quickly, cancel culture, I guess my problem with it has just always been that in a world where we concede as humans that we're liable to make a mistake or maybe an ill-advised judgment, that it doesn't lend itself to the spirit of redemption, to an understanding where you could maybe be educated on the issues. Like I said, I understand the initial impetus for cancel culture, and it made sense when it was being used to, like you said, cut off the revenue streams of people in power that were taking advantage of their positions of power. And that's when it made sense to be exacted. As you see now, though, we have cancel culture kind of unleashed for some of the more trivial happenings of the day. Whereas, like you said, Paul, just because you don't agree with somebody, you want to cancel them, you want to get them out of there. And I think in that we leave a lot of teachable moments on the table where maybe that ignorance could have been met with some level of education. The other side of that I see is a side where it's like you're canceling them because at some point in time you want to stop having to do the work of educating people about being wrong, right? And that there are all these tools out there for you to not sort of be mired in your wrongness. So I get either side of the cancel culture conversation. I think for me, I'm somebody that tries to lend himself to the idea that people can change with information, can change with experience. But I understand why people see it the other side too, especially when their cancel culture is coming on the back end of something that is personally violative or whatever the case may be, why they wouldn't want to see another side of it. So either side makes sense.
That was well said.
Oh, go ahead.
I just want to, sorry. Go ahead, Chelsea. No, go ahead, Chelsea.
Okay. What I was going to say is that I honestly think that to a certain degree, cancel culture is a bit diluted. The reason why I say that is because I think it's become so overused at this point that even when we're talking about the disparities that are present within cancel culture, like I personally have had friends who've been canceled in the space of like activism work, because these days all it takes is a 6-year-old tweet or Facebook post that you put up when you were like 12 to now come back and be like, you actually shouldn't have a platform. And it's the reality of the situation. What I will say is that it's really interesting to see who cancel culture is often applicable for and who it is not, right? So we have a lot of influencers who are white, and like because of their privilege, they can be canceled today and they will still be having their $1 million deals tomorrow. A Black woman gets canceled today, all of the deals and opportunities that she had more than likely will be taken off the table. We saw that even with Nick Cannon, for example, who was canceled because of his problematic things that he said. Not saying that I stand for what he said in any way, shape, or form, but I think it's really interesting the fact that Nick Cannon was canceled when we look at a lot of like these celebrities, influencers who really like use a lot of white supremacist propaganda, whether that be like undermining the movement or just like the identities of people, they're not canceled, or they'll be canceled today, but by next week be starring in a movie, right? Or have their deals coming up. So I think the question really becomes who is driving cancel culture and who is it applicable to and who is it really for and who is it serving?
That was a great point. You brought me to my next question, which is why can someone like R. Kelly be canceled, but Trump cannot? Is it because of the base of their power or not?
I mean, as a sort of literal function of how cancel culture worked for R. Kelly, it's like R. Kelly's cancel culture worked because as the people, we were powerful to cut off all avenues of R. Kelly, right? Like, okay, we're stopping streaming his music. We'll stop giving his content life, right? With President Trump, that missed opportunity was 2016, the election, right? Like once he was the president, it's kind of like there's only but so much cancellation that could have been done by people, which is why trying to cancel Donald Trump is a bit more nuanced now that he's sort of in president and running freely as the strongest man in the world than it is to cancel somebody who is a pop culture icon whose income is being based on a subscription-based service that is run on streams. You can cancel those streams as real people right now. But there is, how could you conceivably cancel Donald Trump right now? I mean, we tweet about him every day. We go out and protest against him, but even still, that doesn't amount to a literal cancellation that would affect his life as the president of the United States. And I think that's where that difference lies.
I think just like, the vote for Trump should have been the cancel culture. The people who, should have got out and voted should have been the factor to the cancel culture for Trump. You know, when we talk about R. Kelly, people choose not to stream his music. People choose not to listen to him, and therefore we call him canceled. And we really have to say, you know, be in mind, especially for this 2020 election, that's why it's so important to vote and to really go out there and make your voice heard so that you can cancel the person that you don't want to be in the White House.
And I think that's like why it's so important also, you know, to think of cancel culture and also think of activism as more than social media, because, you know, although social media might be the impetus for, you know, tweeting like, oh, I'm not going to listen to R. Kelly, you need to stop listening to R. Kelly. You know, like there's still an action behind it. So, you know, and we have to be clear about what those actions are. I talked to my 101-year-old grandfather the other day, and I asked him, you know, what's the major difference you see between the civil rights movement now and the civil rights movement when you were in it? And he said commitment, you know, an action to the commitment. And, you know, that's something that I think also is why cancel culture is diluted as well, is everyone wants to tweet about it, but no one wants to put the action also behind it, and the action that's actually needed, and being very strategic about the action. When they boycotted the buses in Mississippi, nobody was on the bus. You know, like they organized to get people to work still. They still had to do the actions to get people to work and to get to where they need to go, but nobody was on the bus. You know, so that's the type of commitment. Like, are you ready to give up your form of transportation? Are you ready to actually put the action behind and that's the commitment that we need. We actually cancel somebody.
Did anyone else want to comment on that before we move on? And good evening. I'm sorry, Kyra, I didn't hear you earlier when you were talking to me. For some reason, the audio didn't come through, but I'm here. Good evening. But yeah, I mean, okay, so if no one wants to comment, I can continue the conversation. But I agree, I guess, for me being in a legacy organization like NAN, and seeing a lot of the different levels of how culture can be canceled, I guess for me, and this can be for any huddler, any activist out there, if you support a legacy organization or what, it just seems like the advocacy level seems to get a lot of pushback, and a lot of threats of canceling culture. And people are not really understanding like the different layers and the different facets of legacy movements and why they exist, and how even now Black Lives Matter movements and everyone still studies the legacy movements, but then they'll go on Twitter or whatever and they'll try to cancel the culture. I mean, I just don't understand the correlation, and maybe somebody who is not a part of a legacy group or whatever can explain it, because I don't really get it. I don't get how, you know, you look to legacy organizations or you look to legacy groups for certain guidance of things, but then when you get out in public, and I'm not saying you, but I'm saying like in general, this is what happens. Get out in public and it's a whole different story. So how do we continue to push forward in terms of canceling culture without canceling the culture that we need, in other words? And I don't know, that's a layered question, but somebody can take it, I'm sure. No? Do I need to start calling names, Talik?
I have something
to say. Angela?
Go, Angela. I
have something to say, but I'm a part of a legacy organization, right? So
yeah.
Well, maybe let's get the people who are not part of legacy.
Let's get the people who are not.
Yeah, but I can give my perspective because I'm part of a legacy organization.
And you can maybe help to add, because I'm trying to just get the words out. I know it may sound different coming from me, but maybe those of you who echo my feelings or sentiments can explain it differently or better so that it resonates differently. I also understand that. Okay, y'all pretty quiet. That's all right.
I thought Angela was gonna go. That's why. Oh, okay. Well, I'll go because I think that, so interestingly enough, I am not a part of a legacy organization. So Freedom March NYC came out of the George Floyd protests, but a lot of my work, and I would say kind of like coming into movement and understanding of social impact, has always been about intersections. So working in the Obama White House in 2016, right, the importance of like organizations, community work, grassroots work, like leaders, right? Understanding that like you can't even just do this work in corporate America. You also need the civic space. You need the faith leaders. You need everybody. And so I think that I've always just kind of had that framework of understanding. I definitely think that there's a difference though between what like maybe like young organizers think, but also like what the media tries to tell as the narrative of like this type of like divisive type of energy that I think is present in the movement, or emphasizing kind of like these generational gaps and divides. And I think that it's really interesting because I think that in one hand, you definitely need youth leaders, you know, like young generations are the future, but in that same way, I think that there needs to be like more solidarity across movements and partnerships organizations, which is why I can't speak for everyone. Like Freedom March works for everybody, you know, and we make it a point to work with everybody because I think that it's important. Like we don't know everything. And I think that when you don't know your history, that's when you're doomed to repeat it. And there's a lot of learning that you can get from older civil rights organizations, things that they do well, things that they don't, things that perhaps like as like young leaders being in the digital space, like how can we like help amplify, work together? Because I think ultimately it's the same end goal, perhaps just like different ways of doing it. But like I would prefer for a older civil rights organization or Freedom March to have the mic and the platform than someone who is coming from an external perspective of trying to tell our stories for us because we didn't do the work of building solidarity in the movement. And so someone else is going to tell that story. So like,
yeah, and I feel like that happens a lot, Chelsea, because they see the divisiveness. They see, they like, in other words, if y'all can't get it together internally, then why should we give y'all anything? You know what I mean? And so when we see the divisiveness and we see the canceling culture on many levels, especially towards activists and towards organizations that are out speaking for the culture, you know what I mean? That just seems to not resonate well in terms of how we can all progress toward freedom and equality for everyone.
agreed.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's
if this-
definitely.
you got it.
No, I was
Got
just
it.
saying that, you know, I think it should be all inclusive. We really need to remember every organization started from something, you know, like your organization started from, the George Floyd killings. Even if we go back into history shows us that, these organizations blossomed from, civil unrest and things that needed to be changed. And I think that, the old and the new really have to work together, because I think the legacy organizations have the tactics and the backing and like the more amplified voice to kind of get things out. And then I think, every time we look at the younger generation, we look at young activists, we kind of see one, we're living in this Twitter sphere world, but they see that, okay, well, we have these new tactics to do, and we're gonna do this and that because we're on a different playing field. But I think that we should all just see kind of what history has taught us, and really, to be an organization, around for this long, you have had to have been doing something right and having to have, those continuous steps so that you could be the blueprint for these newer activists and these newer organizations. But I also think that there was never really always an agreement ever between, a lot of the groups. But the goal is to really kind of get to, to the end post, and that's really kind of justice and equality. I think we're still working towards that. But as far as like the cancel culture of legacy organizations is something that I think is a Twitter thing. Like, I don't think that that's like a real thing that people are really out there, pushing for, but I could be wrong.
To be
Right, because I see that.
No, go ahead, Talik. You already got cut off once. I'm gonna go ahead.
I'm not. I mean, I can chill out in around. But I was just gonna say, I'm gonna throw my little I'm gonna do my little sprinkle here and there. But I was gonna say, like you were saying, I believe there's a form of accountability in that aspect of it, of not only. Of course, we go. I think about it. We all go about things different ways. We all move different. We all learn different. Everybody's a different being, and there's ways that I may know one thing and someone may get it another way. But I don't see it as their way any different than mine. But I understand we may not have got here the same way, but as they said, we all got here by boat. We all here right now, and so I understand that same aspect, that even like in this space, we may not all approach this movement and all approach this work all in the same manner. but it's the fact that we are all doing the work in our own way, in our own style, and so that's what excites me. The whole cancel culture, I just see it as, of the education piece, of educating folks, and that's where, like you said, it happens. Folks are canceled, but I feel like folks are canceled temporarily. Like, I feel like some folks just get a tap on the wrist. It has not really been an opportunity where it's like, okay, next week you may cancel somebody this week, but it seems like Twitter says next week everybody's back on the wagon. And so for me, it's just the education piece. Folks may come out of line or are not just informed on decisions. Like, everybody does not know everything, but as a community, it's our duty to hold folks accountable and educate folks when they are misinformed or saying misinformed information that can lead a crowd down the wrong path. So that's just my take on that. I love, like Ty had said, the whole education piece and holding folks accountable.
So,
And just-
Tylee, just to follow up, just a quick follow-up question for you, because you mentioned something about information education. How do we, and I'm speaking on, like, as a young person who is conscious or woke, how do we educate ourselves and also pass that information on if we can't necessarily trust what we see on Twitter, or we can't necessarily, or we don't know, like, if these stories are true, or, like, we don't know the validity of how, true or accurate these stories are that we are hearing about. So how can we, like, get informed and be knowledgeable in certain areas that we really need to be informed about, like you said?
Yeah, I think I like a lot of things comes, like, on social media is opinionated. Folks are just, like, when we look at Twitter is very opinionated. And I always encourage folks, like when we're talking about candidates and we're talking about folks that are running for office, like, don't take what you see as is. Like, I feel like we have a moral obligation to ourselves to be knowledgeable for ourselves, to not just take what we see. But as for me, if I'm scrolling down Twitter and I see somebody talking about something and I'm like, okay, well, now what is this about? As me being a responsible person and wanting to be informed on myself, I should be able to go to different sources and read different things, or talking to my elders, or looking at different books. Like, I should be able to pour into other things to come about my decision before taking it as is, just off of what I see. Because we already understand we have a president in office that says what he wants to say, and it's totally incorrect information, but yet people see what they see and take it as is. But after they go back and fact check and run the receipts back, it's a whole nother story. So you gotta get your receipts for yourself to know what the total going to be. You just can't take it as it is.
That's right. We're in an information age that you could just research anything and everything. So definitely, we can't follow these memes that we're starting to see all over Instagram and Facebook. You can read them, but you got to go Google it and do your research. I assure you. I mean, I think as just like a lot of us, we're in a lot of different group chats with our peers, and we see these memes come up and they just drop the meme, no explanation. You got to Google it. You have to research it and make your decision for yourself.
Real quick.
Me,
I'm about to say, because I wanted to put this in before I forget, and it was about that initial question. I think to be intellectually honest is to say that what we're fighting out here for in the streets in 2020 is not so far removed from the same fight for Black and brown lives that legacy organizations were fighting for, that there would even be room to cancel them. I mean, regardless of if you agree with how they're addressing it in 2020 or not, I think that at the very least, there is a blueprint of having fought this fight before us, where you take the good, you leave the bad, if that's how it is. The other side of it, though, and it's a sort of big point, is there should be no cancellation of legacy organizations, because to the extent that you feel like they aren't doing the job, that's where you go and you do your organizing. You go and you do your activism to fill in the gaps, because there will be no one driver of this revolution. There will be legacy organizations. There will be organizations like Freedom March NYC, like Concerned Citizens GC, who are, doing the work on the ground in other different ways. And I think that when we talk about bringing about the change that we want to see, it doesn't look like one particular thing. It looks like, all of these things happening in unison, and working together to really progress this movement as far as it can go.
I agree.
Well said.
Yeah, and I think that, like, on the side of legacy organizations, for the NAACP, there is a perception that the NAACP, in most cases around the country, that the NAACP is an older membership organization. I think I heard that the average member of the NAACP is retirement age.
Mhm.
So, you know, like that's real. And like, that is a real perception. The Minneapolis NAACP, we're led by 3 Black women who are all under 30. We're led by, you know, we have, you know, all of our executive board is either women, it's Black women, it's either Black women or Black women. So, you know, that's our executive board. We have elders that we have intergenerational conversations with. Like, our oldest member is in her 90s, and she's an active member. She makes calls every month.
Wow.
So, you know, I do think that, like, for us, a challenge is also the fact that we're battling perceptions, you know, and battling also the fact that, unfortunately, a lot of legacy organizations are also skewed to stereotyped as misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic. And the truth is that once you're there, and when you're a young person in that and you recognize that, you can't let your passion and your love for your organization stop you from pushing the organization forward on these issues as well. You know, you can't, and then also while you're, you know, arguing with your friends and educating your friends, you can't do it in a condescending manner or way that where, you know, you turn off your friends are like, see, look, you know, like, that's what I've been trying to say. So it's like really important that we invite people in, and we continuously do that work to invite people in. And not everyone is going to want to be, you know, a part of it, but I know for a fact that just pushing these issues and being vocal on, you know, the fact that Black trans women are being killed and murdered at extremely high rates. And the fact is that the national NAACP, we helped push the national NAACP to make a statement on it. You know, and so a part of our organization is that you can, as a member and as a branch, activate your branch and then activate the national organization as well. You just need to know how to do it. You need to know where your power lies as a member. And that also takes that research. The research isn't just stops, you know, at what the policies are. The research goes on to how you conduct yourself in a meeting, how you can go up the ranks, or so to say, push your policy forward in that organization as well, because it is a lot. It means you have to know your Robert's rules. It means you have to know, you know, how to put a motion forward. It means you have to know how to escalate it. It means you have to be persistent in calling people and calling people and calling more people. And it's hard, and it's hard. And I mean, I understand why people don't want to do that bureaucracy part of it, but you can see the change. And I've seen it. I've personally seen the change.
And also flagging the fact that even our Washington, D.C. Bureau is led by the youngest D.C. Bureau chief, Black woman under under 40. And even
Shout
the
out to
fact that
Ebony
our
Riley.
policy advisors, Ebony Riley, shout out to Ebony, and even Kyra myself, me being a 23-year-old policy advisor in a civil rights organization, and Kyra being 25, the youngest policy office in DC, sitting and working with members on the Hill, like advising members of Congress in just our 20s. So we think about legacy organizations, it's so much involved. NAN has been building pipelines to youth for the longest. And I think that's the important piece. And when we look at these legacy organizations, they're building pipelines, and these young folks that are in these positions that are working hand in hand, because we understand the importance of taking what we know and what we have now in this moment, and building what we see today. So definitely shout out to, you know, Ebony and our DC Bureau. I had to throw that out.
I would also just say, to quickly add, that I feel like in order to do this work, you definitely need to be low ego. And I think a lot of times we see that the ego gets in the way of people being able to humble themselves and just say, first and foremost, I don't know everything. And number two, I need you. And I think that when we're talking about community and activism and creating change, I very much so believe, and Freedom March believes in the importance of, like, because you are, I am, which means that I need you to exist in the same way that you need me to exist, right? Like, we need the young people, we need the people with experience, like, we need the history, we need generations in order to do this fight, because first and foremost, it's completely exhausting, right? Like the burnout, the emotional toll, the physical toll that it takes on you. And so I think that community is really important. And I think that when we're also talking about, similar to what Angela said, about you need to know how to escalate things. You need to know how to, you know, have a meeting with someone and pitch an idea. And what it comes down to is that there's one element of activism and social impact that is being on the front lines and creating change, but I also think there's another element that is the strategy and the behind the scenes strategy. And I don't think that you can fully say that you are being able to do the work in its entirety if you are not leaning into that strategy element of, again, I don't know everything and I need to tap on the people that do, and I need to tap in community, because community is where you will find resources, and it's also where you will find change, right? Like nothing exists in a silo. So I think that's really important as well.
That is so key. And like the truth is that humbling yourself means being beholden to community, and always remembering that. And it's not just the community members who are, you know, judges, Black CEOs and the Black excellence, you know, goals. It's also the community members who need services, who are dealing with law enforcement every day, who, you know, sometimes, you know, so I come from, you know, just full disclosure, middle income background, you know, I didn't know how to fully hear at first. I didn't know how to fully hear what community members were telling me. And I had to, in a lot of ways, realize that the classism, elitism, the like, oh, dang, you know, like I couldn't, there's some things that I had to humble myself on, and to be beholden to community, to actually hear what people were telling me. And when it also to hear that there are opportunities to educate them as well. We're having this in Minneapolis. I'm in Minneapolis. We're having this conversation around defunding, abolishing the police, and reforming the police. A lot of people, you know, they were pushing on the city council for abolishing. They said we're going to dismantle the police in a press conference, you know, in a park and everything. Community members were coming to me saying, I don't know what this means. I don't know, like you know, I don't know, like, and so it was really interesting that you saw the city council saying community members want to dismantle the police and using Black pain as, you know, their pitch. First of all, the amendment wouldn't have dismantled the police. There would have still been police officers. It would have just, the power would have been from under the mayor to under the city council. And so, but the truth is that, you know, I feel like there's also politicians and groups that use the saying of like, I have the community behind me. But when you go to the community, you realize they really have an ear for some people. Some people are talking to them. The community doesn't really know what's going on. They don't even know, you know, some people, I was trying to decipher with multiple groups what their plan was, what that meant to defund the police, everything. And for us, we had a 40-point police reform plan that week after George Floyd's uprisings, you know, the uprising. We had a 40-point plan for police reform. We got canceled because we weren't here for dismantling the police. And, you know, it was like and unfortunately, because the focus shifted to dismantling the police, what that meant, no reforms have happened. No reforms have happened on the state level and on the local level. And unfortunately in Mississippi, the governor was saying it's so, where George Floyd has died, no major police reforms has happened, yet in Mississippi they can pass things. Right. Why? Because everyone was focused on dismantling the police without having community members involved, and community members have been fighting for decades to get simple police reforms pushed in. And when our opportunity came, unfortunately, you know, some newer organizations, they had the ear. And that's fine. That's fine. No one said we don't want to, you know, that abolishing the police is not in the future. We're said that today, right now, we can pass this, and it wasn't passed.
Okay. Angela, you just dropped a whole bunch of things that made my ears go. So basically, I have a question. So the conversation is going great, and I was listening to everybody. I was trying not to speak at first because I'm a little opinionated. But so are we cancel culture, or are we saying it's necessary? Because why I'm asking that is because, okay, so for two reasons. So we were talking about Twitter, and I think Talik raised that earlier, that it was kind of birthed on, or was it Paul? One of you guys said that it was birthed on, cancel culture was kind of birthed on Twitter. And if you're not a part of Black Twitter or that like world, you kind of miss the whole cancellation, which is true, because sometimes some people are canceled and it's like, wait, what happened? I just missed the whole thing. But Talik, you also talked about they're not really canceled because they can come back. So are they using the wrong words? Are they being paused? Are they put on punishment? Like what? I just feel like the whole cancel culture, because I've been a part, I do Rev's social media, right? So I get all of the acts and the notifications, and they try to cancel him about 50,000 times, and they don't have the base to cancel him because his base, half of them is not on Twitter. But the point is that when we talk about this, and everyone's basically a key point of this conversation that I feel like we're not saying is accountability. And I think cancel culture is related to accountability, and it's basically an aggressive way to try to hold somebody accountable. But there's a part of cancel culture that literally can destroy somebody, or that can destroy somebody's complete mental, their financial, their jobs, everything can just be taken away and no one has ever heard of them again. But then some people, like we were saying earlier, like Trump, or like even R. Kelly, because R. Kelly, well, maybe not R. Kelly, but other people have been canceled, and then they're still here and relevant and thriving in America. So are we going to agree to, when people start coming at different people to maybe change the conversation or change cancel culture to accountability, or some, I don't know, some kind of unified response amongst us? Because at the end of the day, we have to change the narrative. We have to change our actions. In order to do that, we have to have a collective of us. And like we were all talking about it earlier, and I want to talk about something that Angela talked about as far as the NAACP. I totally agree with you. But about defund the police, right? And I'm probably gonna get in some trouble right now, but I'm gonna jump up on a limb real quick. So defund the police. So I've been at marches with NAN and without NAN in these streets since for the last few months, before George Floyd. You can always find me at a march. I like to protest. I'm guilty. But at the end of the day, at some of the marches, it was basically like F the police. We don't need the police anymore. So basically people are trying to cancel the cops, right? If we're speaking about cancel culture, does that make sense to cancel the cops? Or should we be trying to hold them accountable and change the system? Because I just feel like our tactic, are we with canceling? Is it canceling? Like, are we ending something and completely destroying it? Or are we causing, like, just the aspect of it, I feel like is wrong. Because back then, so we talked about the NAACP's tactics, and we talk about NAN, and we talk about other people's tactics back in the day. The Freedom Riders we could talk about. We're having a march on August 28th. We could talk about the original march. But as far as canceling, so they didn't cancel the bus companies, right? They did a boycott to show their power. And once they showed their power, then they resumed it. So maybe we should stop canceling, doing this cancel culture, and figure out a better way to access and use our power. Because at the end of the day, we're not getting anything from canceling these people. That's all I'm.
I think the conversation about defunding the police, and we hear this conversation often. So here in DC, we have over 30 police forces, right? Mm-hmm. And one of our police forces, the chief police force, MPD, they have a budget of over $500 million. Now you go to some middle schools here in DC, you go to some high schools here in DC, you go to some neighborhoods east of the river, you say to yourself, maybe we could have dealt with the reallocation of funds in a way where we have all these police forces. It doesn't necessarily equate to zero police, but what it does equate to is a common sense redistribution of assets that exists within this municipality. Now, I think that as we have the conversation about the phrasing, defund the police, and my father was having a heart-to-heart with me earlier where he was like, I want somebody that I can call if my mom is getting robbed or something like that, and it's this conversation that like defund the police may seem like incendiary language that sort of promotes this thought of anarchism. That's why for me, the wording that I've now started to frame it with is revisit public safety, because it lends itself to the ability for me to have this nuanced conversation about what I mean when I say defund the police. Mm-hmm. It gives me an ability to elaborate on saying, okay, we obviously need some level of security in these cities, right? Let it be something that is representative of justice and something that's equally administered. Let it be something that is reflective of the will and the values of the people. Right. So to answer that question, I do think that there is room for that conversation, but I think that in the ways that it's framed, it kind of requires people to take a hard line on it, because there are a lot of suburban Democratic voters, right, who hear defund the police and sort of hear it as F the police. And in their mind, it's like they don't align with that. Right. They do align with the public safety model where if redone would respect the many of us, but the idea of sort of canceling out safety as they know it, or as they've known it, without an adequate sort of replacement for this public safety model looks like, is the thing that inspires the most fear, which is why when I'm out in the streets protesting, I say it's not enough just to be an abolitionist. You have to be an abolitionist plus, because you have to be an abolitionist, but also somebody who's doing the theory work to think about the systems that will come next. Otherwise, they'll be replaced by systems that don't serve you. So that's definitely a conversation I think needs to be had, for sure. And it will go a long way to dispelling a lot of the mysticism around what the philosophy is when people are talking about defunding the police.
Because we're always even talking about, like, when we're in the streets, like, we understand, like, it's community programs, it's like mental health services, it's housing security, it's job security that make community safe. We understand, like, the systemic racism that from our country that disproportionately affects black and brown communities. We understand they didn't have opportunity in the first place. It was very the quote that I heard before, I forget who said it, and they tell folks to pull themselves up by the bootstraps. How can you pull yourself by the bootstraps if you had no foundation to even put your boots on in the first place? And so we understand that it's these opportunities that create safety. So when we're talking about revisiting, it can be very tricky when we're talking about defunding the police. Like, as Ty said, some people think you're just saying, like, we don't need them at all. But I think there's an understanding of having that we understand as a community that opportunities make community safe. Like, we understand that when folks have access to healthcare and have access to jobs and have access to education, there's so much room for growth and so much room for opportunity that folks can keep our community safe. When I think about even the aspect of the fact that, say, for example, I'm playing music on my front porch. Me and my neighbors have an understanding of community that, hey, I may be playing music at this time of the day, but hey, you may want to play your music too. And so I think it's a sense of community that we understand, like, hey, like, you got it here, I got it then. That folks understand that communities can make each other safe and opportunities can make each other safe. But that isn't saying like we want to get rid of the police, but just saying that we understand that there are certain aspects a part of community that keep us safe.
I agree. And I would also say that, we need to also analyze the goals, right? Even in saying we want to provide more services in Minneapolis, I'm just talking about the Minnesota context right now, because Minnesota is a very wealthy state. Minneapolis is a very wealthy city. It has a bunch of, top 500, top 500 companies. It has millions of billions of dollars within this city alone. And yet there are people who, when even relying on public services, face racism. They don't want to deal with social services because in the state of Minnesota and in the city of Minneapolis, it is the social service worker that is breaking up Black families. It's not just the cops. And when we're talking about even going to, places like the hospital, going to the hospital, there are Black people who are not getting treated at the hospital, who are not being treated well, or who are treated as criminal because they have a pain and they ask for pain medication. And so, there's a lot of, also the goals are also that what we really want to do is we want to abolish racism in these public institutions. And we want to also transform our criminal justice system. I think that the point of police particularly is, the most visceral, you can see it the most part of our criminal justice system, but we do want to transform our criminal justice system as well, because it is deeply racist as a system too.
Well said, Angela. I'm sorry, I know Kyra and Dominique were hosting, and but I'm kind of jumping in. I want to speak to something because I feel like it was like just glossed over earlier, but it was mentioned that Kamala Harris was trying to be canceled. And that's a problem for me because at the end of the day, and I know NAN doesn't make endorsements, but I'm speaking for myself. She is a Black woman, HBCU student. She's an alumni. I went to Hampton, the other HU with real HU, but that's another story. And then she's an AKA woman. She is the Democratic candidate for vice president. She's Black. And they're basically giving her the black test. Birtherism has already come into the conversation. There's been a slew of attacks even before she was chosen. It was a lot of people in the pool of choices were being attacked. And Ebony Riley, like was just mentioned, DC Borough Chief earlier, was representing us, and a whole powerful group of black women who stood and supported the VP candidates of color. But at the end of the day, I feel like it is our duty to stand up for this woman, just because of she's being held to a different standard than everyone else that's on her ticket and being ran against her. So how do we, should we, maybe some of you disagree, should we take it personal? Should it just simply be politics? Or should we not take the cancellation of it to heart? Or should we be fighting this tooth and nail because the election depends on it, and so does the future of this country? Preferably the black women on the panel can start and our allies can follow up.
I would just say, again, from a Minnesota perspective, Amy Klobuchar was worse than Kamala Harris ever could be. And Amy Klobuchar got all of these little cookies and kudos for just being a mediocre white woman who is also outside of, this senator, she is a very vindictive person. She, is the most just on a personal level, I know this. Okay, so, and I know that even saying this here, I might get a call, but I'm not afraid of Amy Klobuchar. I'm just saying is that there's also, just like you said, there's false equivalencies being held to different levels.
Alea, Chelsea, Kyra, Dominique?
I was going to say something and lost my train of thought, but it'll come back to me.
I think the short answer, Ashley, to me, from my point of view, and I have a similar view to yours for apparent reasons, but I feel that we should fight it tooth and nail, and we need to make sure that we as activists are out there helping to really push this election forward. And okay, y'all, like you said, y'all can choose to vote for whomever you want, vote for Kanye, whatever, but vote. I'm voting. I'm going to push for the Kamala Biden ticket because I feel like that is the best ticket that has been presented to us if we are looking to have real systemic progress and real change happen in this nation. That's, to me, the best answer to what we have right now. So that's my deal. But I feel like as a collective, we need to do everything in our power to make sure that since this black woman is on the ticket, that we need to do everything that we can to make sure that she's protected, well represented, and that she gets the platform just like everyone else has to run fairly and to show and prove to the American people that she's qualified for her position. And she shouldn't have any slander on her name just because of, who she is or the color of her skin and what she values.
No lies either, because people are straight up lying on this woman's name. And the truth is that the truth, okay, we already live in a society where the president lies whenever he wants to.
Speak, Angela.
And white people, especially white men in power, they love to construct their own realities with their lies. We are equipped with the truth, and we are powerful only from the truth. In every religion and every spirituality, the truth and honesty is the greatest value that you have. So, I understand critiquing Kamala Harris, and she's not above reproach and she's not above critique, but let's do it with the truth rather than, also piling on the lies, because Black women are often lied on. And that is what's ruining us, is that Black women are lied on. But we have the truth. We are equipped with the truth. And this movement can only grow from the truth, because we know, because the truth is, of course they're not going to tell us the truth, because the truth is that we are a people that have been enslaved for 400 years and then 100 years of Jim Crow and discrimination. And the truth is, despite all of our oppressions, we have risen up. And despite the sexual oppression of Black women, and despite all of these things, we are still winning. We are still shining. We are still the most excellent, most educated group on the planet. So if we have the truth, let's use it.
Yeah, so I have, Angela, that was Amazing. So I have a few thoughts on this because we've actually been getting a lot of questions about what is our take on the ticket, and especially speaking to like a lot of voter organizations and media about this. And a lot of the sentiments that they've been getting is, oh, well, what do you have to say to people who aren't excited about the November elections, aren't excited about who's on the ticket? And my response is, voting isn't about excitement. This is about our lives. This is about survival. And so when we're looking at who is going to make sure that we survive as a people, who is going to make sure that we are addressing the fact that we currently live in a country that has normalized the fact that there are children in cages, that we currently live in a country that is normalizing police violence in Black communities, the fact that Flint still doesn't have clean water. Guess what? My answer is going to be to go with the party and to go with the elected officials who are going to stand on the right side of history. And it's clear that we have a president who is not capable of doing that. It is clear that we have a president that, because of his ego, because of his privilege, has decided that somehow he is more qualified to sit in the White House than people who have done this work for years, who understand the importance of intersecting identities, who understand the importance of standing in truth, as Angela speaks to. And so with that being said, I don't see the confusion. You know, it's about really making sure that we're centering the message and we're centering the work leading up to November. I'm not here to be the next president VP's best friend. I'm here to make sure that the work that we say that we're doing in our communities, that whoever is going to get in that office is prepared to do that, and we can take them to task in doing that. And we can't do that with this current president because he doesn't even have a moral compass to even guide in his policy decisions and the things that he says. So it's not about what I'm excited about, because truth be told, as a Black woman, I'm not excited. I've been trying to survive for the past 23 years. Our ancestors have been trying to survive for the past 400 years. So guess what? We're trying to survive. And so that same energy of survival is what we're taking to the polls in November. It's that simple.
Doc, that should be a meme. You said, I don't get the confusion. Chelsea Miller, you did that as well. Angela Myers, you did that. Thank y'all for speaking that truth. Anybody else want to follow up?
I just want to say that women definitely have the floor. Y'all drop the mic.
Yeah, I just want to say something.
Come on, Leah.
I have something to say really quick. I think for me personally, this has been a really big conversation I've had, especially with Gen Z, because cancel culture is a Gen Z thing. And I think for me, I've had a problem with pointing the finger at other Black people, telling them that they have to vote for a system that they have seen continuously put them down, continuously marginalize them. And I think it's also a relevant conversation of people that don't feel comfortable voting for any different parties, for any people that they just don't feel comfortable with because they haven't felt like they have fought for their existence well enough. So my personal problem has been pointing the finger at people saying that you have to vote, because I feel like that's also really unfair to do, because I understand why they might feel that way. And I think this all goes back to cancel culture and that being really problematic, because there's no aspect of space for education. Because when you cancel, there's no space to redeem yourself. There's no space to bounce back or learn from the mistakes. But I do think that cancel culture becomes more appropriate when we see someone in particular doing this harmful act or harmful sayings continuously after being educated on that statement or action. And also, like, backtracking to Kamala Harris, I think absolutely we do need to protect her. We do need to have these relevant conversations about the truth of her past. But I also think that protection and accountability do need to be separate. And I think although we're protecting her, we still need to, again, allow space for accountability for those that feel a certain type of way about her past.
I really want to just jump in on Alea's point, because I think that she reflects a sentiment that is something that I, hold on any given day, is that the idea that, like, as Black people in this America, from 1619 till now, we've watched as systems around us that were supposed to work to affect change haven't worked, as the electoral process hasn't worked. We've made some gains, but like I said, we're still out here protesting, right? And so I come a step short of telling somebody, you have to vote. I think that when I'm talking to some of my friends, I tell them that you should vote because you need to exercise your civic duty. I mean, ultimately, we have candidates here, and one of these people will be president. And for me personally, I align myself with this Angela Davis school of thought, the idea that, you know, I don't think that any of these are my candidate particularly, but when we look at who's going to be more amenable to my revolution, who's going to be more amenable to my world, it's very clear cut that there is one person or one ticket that makes more sense than the other. And in relation to, you know, where I fall in the political spectrum. I think that I saw a meme that was on Instagram that kind of touched on a very important point, which is like, if you live in an urban city, you know, ideally going to your location, you want to get there by Uber, right? But if you have a public bus route or a train that gets you as close as possible, you ride that bus or that train, you don't sulk because you didn't get the Uber, you get as close as you can to your destination, and maybe you might have to walk a block, but you'll get to where you need to get to, or as close as you need to get to. And so I'm looking at this election as kind of like that. Like, this is a bus ride. This is not a marriage where we're getting the one, where we're finding our dreams for a candidate. This is a bus ride that is getting us as close to our destination as possible. I think that for me, there is a respect that I don't ignore with Kamala Harris doing what she's done as far as being a Black woman and making a way in a world that tries every step of the way to hold Black women back. And so I am fully for protecting Black women. And, you know, as a Black woman in this space, it is now imperative that we protect her. I do think, though, that we would be remiss not to also have these conversations, accurate conversations, truthful conversations about where we could see some improvement with her. But as Alea reflected, I think that right now it's kind of a conflicting time for a lot of people who may be organizing in the streets and then trying to translate this movement politics into electoral politics. And we got on the podcast maybe two weeks ago or so, where we were talking about the difference between movement politics and electoral politics. And where electoral politics is a respecter of timelines, it says we are less than 90 days away from an election. There is this movement politics that we've been more closely attached to as organizers on the ground that says that we want change now, that says that we need it now. And so, you know, some would say that it's not in line with the political realities to say we want the change now, we need it now, and that we have to respect this cycle. But again, it just sort of goes back to this philosophy that there are so many people that are kind of disillusioned with it all, because up until now, what has worked for you as a Black person in this America? Whether it was voting, whether it was abstaining from voting, like none of those things has delivered you anything. So I fall short of, at 25 years old, waxing poetic as though I have all the answers to know what the right answer is, to tell them like, this is what you need to do. But I know personally I will be voting. And I encourage as many people as you know what I'm saying, have the willingness to look into the candidates and see which one appeals to them. And obviously, like I said, as a Black person, there is just a certain platform alignment that made more sense to me, which is why I'm going to do what I do in November. But I fall short, like I said, of trying to make people feel bad for not doing the same, because I understand a frustration with an entire America that has never served Black and brown people. And it's the one that we're all aggressively fighting for.
Thank you, Ty.
Let me just say something real quick. Let me just say something.
Hold on, Leah.
Sorry.
Hold on. Because I want to address what he said, and I want to go back to you, and I want to go back to Kyra. First off, Paul Prasad, it had to jump off one of our speakers, so I just want to say have a good evening and thank you for joining us tonight, Paul. We love you and looking forward to having you back for another conversation. Okay, so to what Ty Hobson said, I just want to say thank you for being honest and thank you for all you shared, as well as Alea and everyone who spoke tonight. But I just have questions personally as Ashley to what Ty said. So I completely understand what you were saying. You can't make people force them to vote if people don't see value in voting. But there was something that you said because there was nothing, we didn't see anything from voting or not from voting in this country because we haven't moved forward. I have this conversation a lot on Huddle and King Talk. Just like when the police reform, the little bills, the chokehold bill was passed, a lot of people were upset and saying, well, that's nothing, that's a tap on the wrist and whatnot. So you're right, it's not enough. It's not even close to enough. But to say that we haven't come from anywhere, or we're the same as we always have been is a lie. It's not true. I think that was more. Let me just address what was said, because a lot of people say that. And I let everyone speak. Everyone can say what you want to say, but I just have to address that because you're not the only person that says that. When you're measuring the state of where we are, you should measure that. measure it clearly, because it's not, you're not just talking to activists of your age. I understand that maybe Gen Z is who you speak to, but it's also things in your lifetime that we haven't seen. I know that people feel like Obama didn't do anything, and the fact that, oh, it doesn't matter that we had a first Black president, but before he was elected, that was a joke. It was literally a joke to see to even fathom that a Black person could become the president of this United States. That even identifying that with a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old completely changes their where they want to go in life, or where they feel that they can perceive to go in life. So even that small part of it is a part of the fight. You can't just take a victory and say, oh, that's too small to count. All victories count. All victories matter to the final victory. Because
the fact that we can vote.
Excuse me. Even if we didn't get towards that step, we would. If you don't step forward one by one by one by one, if you skip a step, that means you didn't make that move. You didn't make that progression forward. So you can't discount things just because you don't value them. Also, you can't discount the shoulders that we're standing upon. As a 25-year-old, the sacrifices that people have made in this movement before you, your grandmother, your great-grandmother was born is disrespectful. And that's why I feel like, as far as legacy organizations, I don't know if that's safe to say, because I'm not a part of new organizations. I don't know the scope of the age group, but I just feel like I can't ever, even as a 32-year-old, sit here and say, oh, I'm frustrated and nothing has changed. I started Huddle because I felt like that. I felt that frustrated after the death of Trayvon Martin. But at the end of the day, if you look at the journey, if you look where we came from, Trayvon Martin is a step forward from where we came from. Even his death is death, but as far as the laws in this country, as far as what we're fighting for, as far as the electeds, as far as the fact that we can meet online publicly as Black people, that we've come a long way from that. We have to go further, yes, but you can't discount where we've come from. And I think that's not fair as activists and advocates in this movement to basically slap our ancestors in the face for the big and the small victories that they have made. There's blood on the ballot. There's blood on the ballot. People didn't have the right to vote in this country. It hasn't even been over how many years that we had the right to vote in this country. And Kamala Harris, no, she ain't nobody's perfect candidate. Nobody is saying she's a perfect candidate. I don't think she turns many people on. But at the end of the day, it's not about just Kamala Harris. It's about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden versus Mike Pence and Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, I refuse. He's not even an option as far as us in this country. We can't get to what table has he sat at with anybody in his entire administration, and then let them come to the table and meet about our issues. What, Van Jones and reform? Are you serious? Those were issues already being fought about. So at the end of the day, the only Black woman that was employed in the White House, he kicked out and called a dog Omarosa. We canceled her. And I wanted to get to the question of Omarosa. Now people are saying she's welcome back at the cookout. So she's also a Black woman. So what happens to this? And I'm sorry, I know we flipped and left the complete conversation, but it's all a part of this, a part of our movement. And as far as our teaching and learning as Black activists on this front. And it's not, I don't think it's ageism. I think it's a conversation we all need to have, because we're all fighting for the same thing. But to discredit something that some people have done, I think is crazy. That's just my personal
listen, and so follow up on that, because I totally agree with you. And if I said that, then I must just been misspeaking in passion, because it's ahistorical. To sit there and to say that there hasn't been anything done before us is intellectually dishonest. And so I misspoke, if that's what I said, because you're right. We do stand on the shoulders of giants, on John Lewis, on MLK, on Al Sharpton, on those that have come before us and forged even the opportunities for us to be out protesting in the streets in the way that we are these days, right? Like that would have been met with hoses and things, but for the ones that have paved the way. So I do understand that. And that was just more a misstatement. I guess for me, what I was saying, and when I say nothing has happened, I mean, obviously there are several somethings. We have Civil Rights Act, we have all these different things. There are somethings. When I say nothing meaning I am somebody, I graduated from high school when I was 13 years old. I got my bachelor's degree at 15. I got my master's at 17. And even still, in the majority of this America, when I walk around and I throw this hoodie on, I'm a nigga. I'm discounted. And so when I say the nothing, it is the nothingness that still sees this dark skin and values me the way I was valued at 16, 19. As somebody who is, you know what I'm saying, lesser than material, who's somebody who is like property, tantamount to property. Somebody who is, you know what I'm saying, and we're seeing it where capitalism reigns supreme over Black life, where you will kill somebody like a George Floyd over a counterfeit 20, or, you know what I'm saying? And so that's what I was sort of referring to. And maybe I didn't do as good of a job of articulating it. And I do apologize for that confusion, because I in no way want to muddy the waters of respecting the work that was done before us, because there definitely was immense work by leaders of all all across the board in order to pave the way for the necessary work that we're doing now in 2020.
And I just wanted to jump in here a bit and kind of just based on the conversation we just had and the conversation we've kind of been having throughout this entire conversation. But to think about how does cancel culture lend itself to this kind of political purity test that we've seen some of our leaders talk about in the past, and kind of like an unforgiving way where if, for example, what Angela was talking about earlier, if you're not getting all of it, if we're not right at abolition, it's nothing. Like it has to be an all or nothing type thing where we kind of end up with nothing if we're too focused on the all. I was just wondering if there are any thoughts there amongst the panelists.
Yeah, so that's interesting, Kyra. So when you say that, it kind of makes me think about even this conversation. We're talking about, are we going to cancel the ballot because we don't like what's on it? And so I think that what we're seeing right now with November coming up is the importance of recognizing the power of showing up. And one of the things that I always say in 2016, which was by far one of the most traumatic days of my life, was 2016 elections, because I was in the White House when we actually had to make the reality that we had to hand over, right, the White House to an administration that was literally going to spend their entire administration destroying everything that we had worked for. And so when we talk about the legacy of the Obama administration, when we talk about the legacy of the civil rights movement, it's all connected, right? Like everything builds on top of each other. And I think that's so important. And there's a danger, and I'm Gen Z, so it's not even from a generational perspective because I'm Gen Z, I'm 23. It is a danger in telling our communities that they do not have a responsibility to show up to the ballot. And the reason why I say that is because it is our responsibility as leaders to educate them on the importance of being present at that ballot, to educate them on the history. We can't talk about 2020 as one of the largest social movements in American history without talking about in 1964, the Civil Rights Act, and in 1965, the Voting Rights Act, which was only about 50 years removed from where we are right now, right? And so when we're going to the ballot, it's not just about making a statement about who's going to be the president, right? It's about making a statement about our ancestors and the history of the work and continuing to show up for that. And so in that same way, when I think about the November elections that are coming up, it's my responsibility and it's Freedom March's responsibility. And I think organizers, truth be told, their responsibility to show up to the ballot and show that we can definitely do protests because that's an element of it. But in the same way, we live in a democratic society. We live in a democracy, right? And so it's our responsibility as well to show this democracy that we will show up in that way as well. And if this is the system in which we're saying that change is going to be created, and I would definitely say this is one way to do it, because we also know when we organize, when we push, when we mobilize, when we protest, that also creates change, but change comes in different forms. And I think this goes back to our earlier conversation where we're talking about strategy. What does it look like to strategically lead in this movement, to strategically be a part of the conversations that are necessary to drive this movement? And I think in that same way, we need to get young folk, we need to get folks who perhaps never even voted and they're older out into the polls. We need to make sure our senior citizens who want to come out but are afraid because of the coronavirus and there's voter suppression taking place, that we figure out a way to make sure that they can go out and vote and come back home safely, because that's a part of the narrative that they want us to believe, that our voices don't matter, that our vote doesn't count. But in reality, when we look at who carries the Democratic Party, that's why we were able to get Kamala to be the VP, because it was Black women, it was organizers, it was the Black community that was like, y'all are not about to just take our vote like that. Like, we need representation. And so in that same way, it's really pushing with the numbers, making sure that we are present, making sure that we're doing the work, having those conversations, right? It's all encompassing. And so I say all of that to say, Freedom March has launched our Freedom Fall campaign, which is a digital training to get folks to register to vote, to teach them how to do nonviolent protests. And I would really encourage that as we think about whether we're newer organizations, older organizations, whatever, to really have a plan of how we are intersecting movement politics with electoral politics, because believe it or not, they are in bed with each other.
I definitely agree. And I would say, what I always believe is that the criticism that a lot of people that we do see from cancel culture, like on Twitter, you know, there's always at the root of it someone who feels powerless, and they are taking to social media, they are taking to, you know, this platform to regain their power and feel powerful in a sense of the word. Right when we're talking about strategy, voting is our constitutional power. This voting is our power. And I think that when I hear a lot of people, you know, saying like, why vote? A lot of it is usually young Black potential voters who them not going to the polls determines elections. And not only is it for presidential elections, but it's for local elections that immediately impact us in ways that, you know, we can't even foresee. And when it comes to Congress and the Senate, the reason why even we have that a lot of these, how do I say this? That the president is terrible, we know this, and racist, but he is backed up by the actions of Congress. You know, he's backed up by the Republicans who they vote in his selects for the Supreme Court. They do not stop him. That's also the people we can vote for. That's also, you know, who's on the ballot. And so, you know, it's really important that we also acknowledge that it's not just the presidential election on the ballot. It is the future of your city, your state, and the local elections determine a lot more for your day-to-day than a presidential election might, and how a lot of Gen Z, I'm also Gen Z, feels. I'm a Gen Z grandma. I'm the last year of Gen Z, but I'm a Gen Z grandma. That's what I call myself. But like, that's how we feel, right? Like we're feeling powerless. And so just like Chelsea said, really being clear and educating on what are the strategies, what are the tools needed. For some folk, you know, they don't feel like in office Biden can be held accountable. That's not true. I mean, I feel that the simple fact that Kamala is not the presidential candidate is because we held her accountable. You know, like, my personal opinion, not of the NAACP, she should have been the presidential candidate because she is much more, you know, she is much more liberal on a lot of things than Joe Biden. She is a lot more experienced with what I like than Joe Biden, but now she's the vice president. So she was running for president, right? She was running to be on the presidential ticket. She didn't get it. That, in a way, is a form of accountability. And that, I mean, it is. So, you know, also taking that into note, I mean, Bernie is not on the ballot because he didn't mobilize. People didn't vote for him. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was that it didn't get the numbers, and that's just what it is. And I mean, that's what we have to just be clear about. Go vote. And it's not that there are more white people voting for Trump. It's that there are more white people voting, and they're voting for Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would also just quickly add, because I don't want to do a disservice to the conversation as well by lending a kind of the narrative that voting fixes everything, because that's not what we're saying. And I don't want that to be conflated with what we're saying. What we are saying is that voting is a part of the solution, and to act as though it is not is dangerous. With that being said, though, voting is only one part of the solution. We know that even when elected officials are in office, that it is our responsibility to continue to hold them accountable when they're launching policies, when it's time to show up, when it's time to protest, lobby, for those of us who have those 501c4s, you know, the vibes, all of that other stuff, you know, really pushing forth the agenda of the work that needs to be done. But with that being said, we also understand why people are disillusioned. I'm not going to sit here and act like I don't understand. I completely get it, right? It is disheartening every day to go on social media and see another Black person being brutalized by the police and feeling as though you're powerless, feeling as though there's nothing that you can do about it. But there is power, right, and being able to make sure that we are participating in a system that, granted, was designed, right, for us to fail, but in spite of that, we have risen anyway. and we will continue to rise, and we will continue to leverage the resources that we have in this movement. So if y'all want to come with the democracy and say that we have to vote, then sure, we're going to vote and make sure that the same way how Trump didn't win the general vote in 2016, he's not going to win it in 2020. And not only is he not going to win that, but he's also not going to win the Electoral College. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by showing up.
Yeah, I think my main point might have been a little confused, but my main point was just not invalidating those that feel that way, and making sure that we're having that conversation with those people as well. I personally, of course, have to vote. I'm a Florida voter, so I feel like it's my duty to vote as a Florida voter, but I just feel like it's also kind of backtracking the whole conversation of cancel culture to invalidate those that feel that way, and understanding why they might feel that way, and again having that conversation, but just not being, what's the word, antagonistic and pointing the finger at them. And I've seen that a lot, and I found myself doing that in the beginning of my activism, having conversations with particularly young Black men, and them telling me consecutively that they didn't feel comfortable voting, or they didn't feel like it would be tangible change to them. And it took a lot of conversations with myself to finally understand that aspect is also valid, and understanding why they feel that way, and trying to lend my education to them and telling them why voting, it could help them, but also just not being antagonistic in that space as well, because it is valid as well. That's just was my point on that. And I also will say this, as a co-organizer with Concerned Citizens, Kyra, Tyleek, and Ty were all a part of Concerned Citizens. I had this conversation with Ty yesterday, actually, of how we are one of the only protest groups in DC that don't actively promote abolitionist policies. Well, it wouldn't really be a policy if they're abolitionists, but you get the gist. We more so promote tangible change that we can see change for tomorrow, like Angela mentioned earlier. And we've gotten pushback from other groups because they don't see that as liberation. And also having that conversation of that point is also very valid. And me, as a Black woman, a young Black woman, I cannot invalidate how you feel in a country where you have always been marginalized or ignored because you are a Black man or woman, or a Black.
Aaliyah froze up.
Okay.
You're cutting out, Aaliyah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me now? Can you see me now?
Yes. All right, she cut off, so let's just.
Well, I know, because I've also had this conversation with Alea, and I know we all have our different opinions. I think that's why it's like really great to be able to come together here and talk about it. I mean, I think everybody who works in the activism space knows that it is incredibly important to vote. We just lost John Lewis, and we saw what happened to him on that bridge when he got bloodied up, right, for our right to vote. People have died for our right to vote. That is not a small thing. And one of the things I really also appreciate about Kamala's ticket, or Biden's ticket with Thor Kamala on it, is that her chief of staff is Karine Jean-Pierre, who I like really, really, really admire. But one of the things that she speaks to a lot is being an immigrant in this country, and being a Haitian immigrant, and understanding her role, like coming here and getting involved in politics, being a grassroots organizer, because in the time her parents were growing up in Haiti, they weren't able to participate in democracy in that way. And so I think there's something incredibly important about holding this country to her ideals, right? Like making sure that we never slip into a country where we can't speak up, which I think is part of what makes cancel culture difficult, because when you're canceling other activists because they're not saying exactly what you're saying, then you're silencing voices when a lot of us are all pushing for the same goals within the activism space specifically. So just making sure that we're bringing everyone out to vote with us, figuring out how to meet them where they are, and I think that's kind of what Alea is saying now, like not silencing anyone who doesn't feel like they can't, and I don't want to speak for her, I know that she's just having some technical difficulties, so when she comes back, I'm sure she'll speak to this point herself, but not saying, okay, you're a bad person because you feel left out of the system that was never designed for you to participate in, but more so thinking, okay, well, how do we make sure that you feel empowered, because we fought for this right to vote and we got it, and it took them years to value our vote as a block. I remember 2016 wasn't too long ago where it was really hard to even get candidates to say Black Lives Matter. The 2018 midterms, I think special election with Doug Jones really changed the narrative of what Black votes look like, at least for my generation, and how valued our votes were. And now we have a Black woman on the ticket, which I think is really important. And I think we have to continue to show up and push this country to do what she said she was going to do. She said she was about liberty and justice and equality for all. And she said that our voting is our constitutional right. Like, we should all be able to do that once we reach a certain age, and we can talk about what that age should be and maybe talk about like moving that down. But it's very important that we all know that we're in this together and we're planning to vote. So I know there are other folks who want to speak, but just wanted to like kind of bring that in. Alea, I hope I gave it a little.
Yeah, I just want to say, I feel like my connection's still really bad.
No, it's good. It's good.
You sure you can hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just wanted, you wrapped it up pretty well, Kyra. And I just wanted to say, like, one aspect that I've been bringing to the conversation is like showing folks that like our vote is really important, that we are seeing a massive amount of voter suppression right now. And that just goes to show that even they know how powerful our vote is. And just looping that in, and I feel like that is a real relevant conversation right now. And I've been trying to shift a lot of tables into talking about voter suppression, even in the gun violence conversation as well, because we are seeing it at a tremendous rate right now, and I don't feel like a lot of people are talking about it. But that's one aspect that I've been bringing to folks that might feel like their vote is not important, is just showing them, like, if you look, your vote is so important that they're using a bunch of different tactics to stop you from voting. And that's just one little sprinkle that I just wanted to add in there. But Kyra, you wrapped it up very well.
Somebody was saying something?
Yeah, I know Patrice was trying to jump in. Did you still want to speak? No? Yes? My cancel.
You're on mute.
Okay, am I muted? You guys can hear me? You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I just wanted to hop in really quickly. You know, I was listening to the young people talking about the election and should it be canceled. I just want to make sure I was clear on those comments, because if you look at Donald Trump, he would be the reason why election is important. Like November 3rd, there should be no discrepancy or wondering or guessing if your young people should get to the polls. 4 million young people over the age of 18 would be eligible to vote for this election. There's no reason why a 25-year-old should think that their vote doesn't matter, or to go out and encourage their friends to vote. The reason why we have that orange man in the White House now is because of thoughts and mindset like that. Like, we got to renew our minds. We got to get out there. John Lewis, may he rest in peace. Man, that man died fighting to vote
fighting to getting hit in the head, and countless other people that wasn't even mentioned like him. You know, we got to renew our minds, man. And if you're not part of a legacy organization, you need to join one, get educated, know what you're talking about, young people, man. This is how they persuade us. And we get people like Donald Trump in the White House. We get Kanye West trying to take the votes. We get Nick Cannon trying to take the votes. Y'all young people got to get educated on what's going on. Get to those polls. October 19th, you have until October 19th to get registered to vote. There's no reason why a 25-year-old should be wondering and guessing if they should vote. That's crazy. Do you see the state of this world now? This man has killed over 200,000 people. And you don't know if you should vote? You don't think that it's important to vote? I've never heard such nonsense, I'm sorry, in my life. I'm gonna leave my comments right there. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and I just want to say something again. That wasn't my sentiment. My whole point was understanding that that aspect is also valid and not invalidating young people that might feel that way. And I think this also goes back into the conversation of our education system. A lot of young people don't know that history. A lot of people don't understand that history because it wasn't taught in their schools. And that goes back to the whole conversation of making sure that we are reallocating funds into our communities so we're being taught this tangible and real history. So I just feel like I personally cannot be antagonistic and yell at someone that might feel that way, but instead lend my education to them so I can hopefully persuade them into the direction of, yes, your vote counts. That was just my point, and I hope I cleared that up, and yeah.
And I dropped it in the chat really quick for those who haven't seen it yet. Like I said, it is a device of the privilege that we are able to have such a nuanced conversation about electoral and movement politics because we are subject matter experts on it, you know, kind of leading from the front in various sort of aspects. So we are informed about the importance of electoral politics hand in hand with you know, movement politics and how it's necessary for both. But there are a lot of people that don't. And we saw that with the 2016 election where we had 63.9 million people that voted for Hillary, 60 that voted for Donald Trump, about 7 million third party, but over 100 million eligible voters who didn't vote. Meaning that in the 2016 election, bigger than Democrats or Republicans, voter apathy was the most successful sort of a political grouping in America. People who felt as though political systems weren't for them. And so, like I said, I think that for us as thought leaders on the ground, as people who you know have the ability to educate, that is where we would be the most powerful. Is sort of lending that education and giving people more tools to make an informed decision about what their impact, their seismic impact could be if they were to vote in a block with their friends who aren't voting, to take all their friends and say, you know what, y'all care about this, right? Well, this city council person is doing this. So you and all your 30 friends that don't go vote on this issue, this is how it affects you. This, you know what I'm saying? Giving, I think, sort of touch points that really bring that electoral politics back home for people who have otherwise felt somewhat of a disconnect from electoral process, because I am of the sentiment that this matters. You know, that
Can't hear him.
Ty, you're muted.
Oh yeah, no, I was saying electoral politics matters, you know, because somebody is going to rule this country and we want it to be somebody who is as close in line with our interests as possible. But it's like selling that is the work that we have to do, because for, like I said, for me, I'm living middle class, relatively comfortable, insulated from some of the things that I protest from. But for a lot of my friends, whether they're from the LGBTQ community or marginalized low income communities or wherever, their sort of slant on electoral politics is more militant because they've cycled through elections in their lifetime and haven't seen anything change in their immediate environment. And so it's kind of important for us to really stress, like I said, how their political agency could translate to the tools that they need to change their ecosystem in real time. Hey, you can go elect city councilmen. Hey, you can go and elect this mayor. You can go and elect this president. You can go and elect these people where this change will flow down. But I think that the heavy lifting is us organizing and educating.
And Marshall, are you still on? Did you want to say something? I think I saw a message in the chat that you wanted to.
And here.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to just
He's frozen.
Just, listening. Am I back?
Yes.
All right, yeah, so, really quick, I think, what we've heard tonight I think it's beneficial. It's good to hear everybody's perspective. I just want to give you some, by way of encouragement, and I talk straight, so I hope nobody takes it the wrong way. I just believe that just the notion of questioning voting, and this is not directed to anyone, generally speaking, the notion of questioning voting is the language of white supremacy, period. The fact that we could even question it, for me, you're not qualified to even, there's no activism without voting. And so the end goal to activism is to get legislation or to get substantive change that we all benefit from. And so that doesn't happen by saying no justice, no peace alone. You don't get
All right, Stevie, you're breaking up. So can you go into an area or change your location? Okay. You keep breaking up, Steven. So if you can move from wherever you are into another area, that may help. If was there someone else that wanted to contribute to the conversation while we're waiting for Minister Marshall to join us?
Hey, can I say something real quick?
Of course.
So one thing I do want to say is that it's gonna be really quick because I don't want to cut into too much time. All I'm going to say is that for real changes to happen, we absolutely have to vote, because we can't just sit around and say, oh, this is happening, oh, that's happening, oh, we're so tired of this, no peace in our neighborhoods. Like, if we don't vote and stuff like that, we don't get real changes. And if we don't vote, they don't hear our voices. So yeah, that's all I have to say. We just got to get out there and vote. That's really important.
Well said from the birthday girl.
Can I say also? Oh, go on. Next person.
I'm sorry. I don't have no camera tonight. I'm getting my lights fixed. But in regards to the voting and the why, I think one of the important things to look at when it comes to voting is not just the aspect of who we're voting for, but what that person that's voted in has the power to do. So when we talk about the issues that are affecting the community, one of the common issues that I've kind of seen in working with crisis is criminal justice. So in terms of criminal justice, the president is responsible for appointing federal judges. So this president has appointed, I think, the second most federal judges in his first 4 years. So if that is a issue that concerns you, then the fact that he's appointed the second most in his first 4 years, if your non-voting is going to help him get another 4 years, his decision making and who he's putting into federal judges or other positions of power can impact the livelihood that you are living today or future down the road. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, and to echo Trayvon's point, I do definitely think that that's something that can't be lost on anybody. You look at Brown versus the Board of Education, the thing that is the reason why we can go into diversified schools. That wasn't the president of the time that decided that. It was the Supreme Court of the time. And so when you look at the prospect of Supreme Court replacements and what that means in the context of these larger fights for women's reproductive rights, for all of these sort of police, criminal justice reform, all these sort of things that we're talking about, you would be remiss, like I said, I think to ignore the impact that a presidential election has on. I don't think anybody is saying that. I think what we are saying is that we have to be intellectually honest about the fact that there are some people who just do not have that access to that information. And for that reason, don't understand the seismic impact that a vote on the presidency has. And like I said, it's more of our job to meet them where they're at, to speak their language, and to try to implore them to use their voice in the ways that they see as most powerful. Without, as Alea said, without, I think, really trying to talk down on a people who may not have been educated or may not feel as though it is the right way without some pushing. You know what I'm saying? Let's just do the gentle pushing, the gentle nudging. It's for me and my close friends, the nudging is a little less gentle because we're getting closer to November. So I'm like, bro, you better vote. You know what I'm saying? Like, stop playing. Like, you're black, you got black mothers, you got black family, you know what I'm saying? They're putting people in cages. You understand the political realities of it. And that's kind of how I can talk to some of my closest friends, because that's just the closest we have where I can do that. But I think, just generally, as we're trying to make this sort of larger pitch for a Harris-Biden ticket as the savior of democracy, it's important to educate the people who are otherwise trying to be impartial about this, about what they stand to lose by sitting on the sidelines. Because I think that will incentivize some people that otherwise might have just sort of sat back to get in the game. Because I think that right now there is a deep scourge of misinformation and ignorance that is allowing this idea that you shouldn't vote or couldn't vote to impact change to prevail. So
I guess I'm also wondering if there's like a way to transfer that energy of like disillusionment to I'm just not going to participate, to something of like, okay, I'm disillusioned, but I see that a lot of folks in my community want to vote and they have barriers to voting. So how do I become a poll worker, or how do I become a poll monitor? So even though I might feel like that's not the lane for me, and nobody's gonna tell me what to do or whatever, even though we should all be voting, you're still being a part of the community and you're protecting other people, and you're not just like signing off and not allowing for anything else to happen there. Because I feel like that really roots back to what we're talking about with cancel culture, where it's kind of just like you're canceled and then that's period. Like that's the end of the conversation. And if you're a person of color and you're a person of color who ends up canceled, as Chelsea said early on in this conversation, it affects you way more than if you're like a privileged cis hetero white person who gets canceled and you get to continue to live your life. I think when we're thinking about this in terms of movement politics and election politics, us opting out of voting is going to hurt us more than anybody else. So how do we, and just hearing what Ty and Alea are saying, like respecting where people are coming from and in having those conversations, bring them out and back into the community without necessarily pointing the finger, I think is part of the conversation. So just wanted to throw that out there and wondering what anybody thought.
No, I definitely agree with you. And I agree with Alaya. And I agree with the fact that there very much are people of our generation and of older generations. They like to say it's just Gen Z, okay, but older generations too, who are dissatisfied with voting. But also, I'm just gonna go back to an earlier rant. They also, are inundated with lies. They are inundated with things that are not the actual fact. And we are not educated well, just like Elias said, on the power of our vote in the local election, in who we have. I mean, it's time to cancel Trump 2020. Cancel Trump 2020, and I'm going to tell you how to do it. You go to the polls. That's the number one way to do it. But also, I do want to hear instead of, the media focusing on asking Black women if they are going to support Kamala Harris, I want to hear from the white men Republicans, are they going to support President Trump if he refuses to step down? And the biggest bold-faced, what he's saying already before on the campaign trail, he was in Mankato, Minnesota today saying, I'm not going to be back here when I run for president for the third, fourth, and fifth time, which is against our laws. So I mean, I want to also let's focus on that too, because I do think that we are focusing sometimes we get onto the cancel culture and on who's supporting who's, you know, against that person, and it is Black women. And it is Black women. And, you know, we need to remove that conversation back to, okay, let's cancel Trump, and this is how we do it. And also with the facts of Biden's policy agendas, you know, he has a lot of great ones that center Black people, that bring in people with disabilities. And instead of, you know, maybe centering on, you know, it's just like how they said, like, a lot of people actually really do support defunding the police if you rephrase it. Defunding, not dismantling, but defunding. You know, if you rephrase Medicare for all, a lot of people support it. And so, you know, there's all these things that unfortunately we've been caught in a trap. You know, we've been caught in a trap, unfortunately, where we're being villainized and criminalized just for using the terms and the theories and agendas that are ahead of us, and actually saying, yeah, no, that's something that I believe in because I understand it. And people are looking at us that might not fully understand it. And it benefits, you know, Republicans, it benefits white supremacists that they don't understand it, and that they stay not understanding it, and that they stay seeing the misinformation online from it. So, you know, that's something that we do need to work on. And just like that, just the education piece is going to be crucial, and the commitment piece. I think that our generation is into instant gratification. Unfortunately, with a democracy, it'll take time. You know, the one good thing about an authoritarian, autocratic government is that change can happen quickly. But is that what we really want? Is that what you really want? And a democracy, things take a lot of time. And, you know, MLK said, I see the promised land, I might not get there with you. And we need to also be that committed, saying, you know, this is something that I want, and I don't just want it for me to see it I do want to see it in my lifetime, but I'm going to do this and put in this action so that it can happen, not in my lifetime, but maybe in my children's lifetime and my grandchildren's lifetime too. And that's a commitment that's a harder sell. It's a harder sell, I'm going to tell you, for our generation. But we also have to make that realization and commitment.
I have one last question, and it's probably going to be a hot take, but I find myself, and I used to say this when I just started activism, how it's okay to say, if you don't vote, you can't complain. I feel like that also plays a role into cancel culture. Like we said earlier, cancel culture is, you know, can be problematic. It can be toxic. So how, and I see older generations saying this line pretty often, if you don't vote, you can't complain. So someone not voting, now their problems and their issues are now, they can't talk about it because they didn't feel like voting was the thing for them. I just really wanted to understand why that is okay, and other aspects of canceling is seen problematic. I just find that kind of contradicting, and I really just, you know, I know it's probably a hot take, but I really just wanted to ask.
Felipe, did you wanted to chime in on the conversation, or?
Yeah, I did, but it was about actually like a couple of conversations before. So yeah.
Okay.
Maybe later.
Maybe later.
No, do it now.
Speak now.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, what I was gonna say was first. Those that do know me know that I wasn't born here, and back in Africa, I was born in Togo, West Africa. We have a dictator, pretty much. He's been president for about 40 years. His father was president before for 50 years, and till this day, people still vote. They vote against him. I know for a fact there's lines in my village for however long, and people still vote, knowing that it's not going to work. They still vote. There's everyone. It doesn't matter if they know that the outcome, they still vote. So for me, when my parents finally came to this country and realized, oh, our vote actually does matter, it was always a shock when we heard people saying they're not going to vote. So for me as an immigrant coming, looking from the outside looking in, I was like, whoa, I didn't understand why even back home with people who realize their vote don't really mean anything, people are still not voting. Also being part of NAN now, I've learned a lot more than just voting for the president and learning how your local politicians have a lot more to do with what's going around in the community. Because when you think about it, a president, I don't want to say doesn't care about the hood, but that's not their first priority. Their first priority is the whole country. So they're not going to think about me in my little public school and if I'm eating or whatever. They're worrying about the whole country as a whole. So me, I had to learn that, okay, yes, I have to go now learn about my local politician, and now I have to realize I have to vote also for them and learn what they are doing. So that's what I've been really trying to speak with a bunch of my friends, because for a while they didn't really feel like they should vote because they're like, oh, the president's not going to do anything. And I realized I had to tell them, like, it's important to vote for the president, but we also had to vote for our local politicians to help fix our community specifically before we could worry about, because the president, like I said before, is only going to worry about the whole country as a whole. And now about cancel culture. To me, I feel like sometimes it doesn't work. The reason I say that is when you look outside of politics and you look more into, look at some music and the arts. There was, I guess, Doja Cat and what she did, and a lot of people weren't supportive. I wasn't supportive of it. Yet there was a lot of females I know that were actually, a lot of women I know that were still listening to her. Still supported listening to her music and stuff. So to me, I feel like, yeah, you could get a lot of people to not listen to this person, not go towards what their idea is, but there's always going to be a group that I believe that always go the opposite way and believe what they want. But yeah, that's my little take.
I wanted to personally say that I really appreciated your comment on the aspect of, understanding that how your vote is important, being from somewhere that your vote wasn't counted or considered. Because for me, I found myself viewing voting as more of a duty to me because I have 2 immigrant parents from Trinidad who couldn't always count on their vote here in America because they were not born here, and it took a while for them to become citizens. So that I really, really like that aspect, because a lot of people don't talk about that aspect of being a first generation and having that piled on top of it to feel like, okay, now I need to vote for my parents, because although they're not Americans, they are still living here and are still being faced with all of these issues because they are viewed as just Black. When they're getting pulled over, they're not viewed as Trinidadian, they're viewed as Black. So I really, really appreciated that comment.
I think that also goes to knowing for candidates where they lie on where they lie on the prison reform, because there are people who are in jail and in prison who have been stripped of their right to vote, and voting for them as well. And there are people who are convicted felons in Minnesota. Minnesota is one of the only states where the only people who can't vote out of those who have been jailed or incarcerated are people who are convicted felons, specifically. And so, and we're still fighting for them. We still have to fight for them. And they are the ones who are acutely impacted by prison policies. And we have to fight for them because they do not have any say at all in talking about it. But it's just exactly with immigrants. We're voting for, immigration is on the ballot. We are not talking about immigration a lot. I don't know why we're shying away from it, but that is on the ballot. Prison reform is on the ballot. And these are groups of people who don't have the choice in our country right now to vote or not to vote. And so we need to think about that too. And that is a really good call to action.
Thank you. Before we give the final closing thoughts, I just wanted to wrap because it's 9:00. And for those who are not familiar with Huddle, we end at 9 unless it is said prior. It's been a good conversation. I think we should continue the conversation but maybe we won't, because maybe the final thoughts will put the period behind it. So this conversation was about cancel culture. And if it should be canceled, are we canceling cancel culture, or what are we doing with it? Are we using it? What are your final thoughts around it and the social justice movement? I also feel like it should be said again. I think I said it earlier, but maybe y'all missed it because my voice was louder and whatever. But at the end of the day, accountability is accountability, and that should not be confused with cancel culture. There's a difference, in my opinion, and there's a way to disagree and agree or not. Everyone does not have to agree as activists. Everyone does not have to agree with the way in which we do things. Everyone doesn't have to agree in the way we speak. But you should listen to everyone. You should hear them out, try to understand it, and respectfully or disrespectfully agree or disagree. But you stay on the course and stay on purpose. At the end of the day, this is the Huddle. We huddle up, we get it rocking in here, and we keep it official because we say what we must. But at the end of the day, we hold each other accountable because you're not new to this. None of you are new to this. If you were new to this, then it would be a different approach. So we're gonna hold you to the fire, and we're gonna make sure that if we disagree, you know so, and if we agree, we know so. And I thank Kyra for bringing this issue to the table. At the end of the day, Kyra and Tyleek McMillan, but Kyra curated tonight's Huddle, and we salute you. We missed Malaysia, our president tonight, who was 18 years old. I also want to salute Aaliyah and Copy, the Coalition of Passionate Youth in New York City. They just had, NAN Youth Huddle was a partner on Saturday. They had a Stop the Killing basketball tournament, and I think it was 5 teams, I think over 8 games, and it ended in peace. There was not one piece of violence that night, and everybody tried to get us to stop it and not do it because of the violence tick in New York City, but we did it, and we did it well. And I just want to salute Aaliyah because she is a young woman. She's a teenager, started her own group with another group of young people, and I was proud to be a part. Malaysia's a part of that. For Levy's a part of that. Pinnacle, we all was out there, and that's what it's about, working together towards common goals, no matter what, to get to the goal. I hope to see everyone out there on August 28th. We're marching nationally to demand that America gets its knee off our necks, its foot off our necks, everything up off us, because we deserve it. And we'll be out there collectively. It's under the National Action Network and the Martin Luther King Jr.'s banner, but it's a collective of organizations and partners out there. We're mobbing, and we're making sure that our message is heard. We have an agenda. If you're confused by it, ask, and we'll send it to you. And we also have a collective agenda. But our two main legs of the march is voting reform and police brutality, police reform. So we're dealing with that. Voting is a part of that. And I'm glad we had this conversation tonight, honestly. I hope everyone is cool. I hope everybody don't leave with attitudes of ash, because I turned out. That's just how I am. You'll learn to love me or not. But at the end of the day, I'm gonna be me, and we're gonna huddle up for change, and we're gonna talk and keep it 100. So everyone, for your closing thoughts on cancel culture, and basically how you would like people that's watching this conversation to relate to you or follow up with you, or how can they get in touch with you? Because a lot of people were excited and want to know how to get in touch with the speakers tonight. So make sure you say how to get in touch with you, your name again, just so others may not get it, and also your closing thoughts on the topic. And thank you again to Kyra Valley and Tyleek McMillan for tonight. And also shout out to them AKAs, y'all be representing. All right, anyway.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much again, echoing what Ashley said. Shout out to Kyra, shout out to Kyleek. And really, really happy that we had this conversation. The biggest thing that I would say about cancel culture is let's not talk about canceling without strategy, because strategy is necessary for the movement. And I think that when we do things for the sake of the performative nature of them, we lose opportunities to really create substantive change, and that's what we're trying to do. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon, so let's continue with the momentum, the energy, working together to accomplish things. And you go follow me at the Chelsea Miller, Freedom March NYC's Instagram is at Freedom March NYC, and we're excited to be national partners with NAN for the march that's coming up next week. So, solidarity.
We can just call the names out. Angela Myers, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I think that something that we didn't touch upon that I just want to end with is also that self. And when we are perpetuating cancel culture or going online, what is it that we really need? What is the true thing that we need? And I think that a lot of us actually go on social media when we need healing. And we actually shouldn't be on social media. What we need is we need healing, and we need to address our own traumas. And, that's also a conversation of education that we need to. And we do need to educate ourselves and our community on the healing that our community needs, and then also the outcomes of what we actually want to achieve. And that's that strategy that Chelsea was talking about. So you can follow me on Instagram, but I would actually tell you to follow the Minneapolis NAACP, and that's spelled out Minneapolis, MINNEAPOLIS, because I know it's a hard one, NAACP. So yes, follow the Minneapolis NAACP on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. Thanks.
Alea Eastman.
Hi, yes. So I think one thing that I would like to take away is just finding a middle ground for the different generations in this conversation, and making sure that both sides are being respectful and not invalidating one other side because they disagree. And I think that was probably my biggest takeaway. And you can find me on Instagram or Twitter at Alea Eastman, and you can find Team Enough on Instagram and Twitter at Team Enough, and you can find Concerned Citizens at Concerned Citizens DC on Instagram, and on Twitter, Concerned of DC, and we're both partnering with NAN for this march next week, and we are really excited. Thank you, guys.
All right. Kyra, Tyleek, do you guys want to add ending thoughts?
I have a message from Ty. He got kicked out, but he wants to say thank you everyone for having him. Ashley T specifically says thank you so much for your correction earlier this evening, and that he loves you for it because it was necessary. It's important not to forget or discount those who came before us. He says it was an honor to be with all of us, and he's excited to see us all at the march. You can follow him on Twitter at Ty Hobson Powell. That's Ty Hobson is HOBSON, Powell is POWELL, and on Instagram it's Ty Hobson Powell DC. And then again, thank you all.
Sorry.
I love Huddle so much. Thank you for giving me the space when I was so frustrated a couple weeks ago, and I reached out to Ashley and I was like, I'm just sick and tired of seeing cancel culture paraded around as like movement work without really thinking about the repercussions or even having any real strategy to it. So I really appreciate you, Ashley, for letting me pull my ideas out and letting me be in the space with Huddle. I love all the huddlers here. I love all my NAN fam, Goldie, Dominique, Marcus, I see you on here, Patrice. Just thank you so much. And you can follow me on Instagram at Kyra Valley. That's KYRA VALLEY.
Yeah, then I would say just thank you so much. It's an honor to be on here with you guys. Like, it's always insightful. The conversation is always fruitful. And I would just say, in regards to the cancel culture thing, education and strategy, I think, was the biggest takeaway from this. Educate folks, and just I'm excited to see you all on August 28th in Washington D.C. We find ourselves at a historical juncture in our nation's history, where voting rights, where police accountability, where mothers fear and fathers fear for their child to come home at night, and where they are strategically pulling apart your vote to keep you from the ballot box. But we're sending a strong message on August 28th that we will not be dismayed by fear or out of demanding. As Ashley said, that America gets its knee, its foot, its elbow, its whatever off our neck. And so we're excited to see you. And we'll see you in how many days? 11 days from today. So excited. See y'all soon.
Can't wait to host y'all in DC.
Okay, Pinnacle.
Just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you to all the special guests. Glad that everyone was here and that we were able to have this conversation. Just want to say, make sure if you're canceling someone, hold yourself accountable, and make sure to remember this: real friends don't let friends not vote. I just want to say happy birthday to Ocean, and we will now have prayers by
Pinnacle, I love you, bro.
love you too.
Happy birthday, Ocean.
We will now have prayers by Tyleek.
Love you,
Closing out.
Oh, okay. So let's pray. Happy birthday again. Happy birthday. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for the conversation. Allow us to be take this conversation to be to our daily lives, that we may, continue to push the message of justice, holding folks accountable. Oh God, allow us to stand in our truth, to stand in our power, to use our influence for good. Allow us in this moment to stand on the right side of history in this moment. We thank you for this conversation. We ask that you bless each and every family represented today. We pray a hedge of protection over each and everyone on this call tonight who's listening. In Jesus' name we do pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen, amen, amen. Thank you all for that prayer. Closing it out. Happy birthday, Ocean. And thank you again to all of our speakers. Thank you to our curator and leader, Kyra Stephenson Valley. And thank you again to everybody for joining us tonight. If you want to watch the conversation, you can visit nationalactionnetwork.net, or you can check it on our Facebook Live. We'll be back next Monday. We're going to have a conversation about the school system, going back to school. It's very important, and Pinnacle raised that issue. So if you have anybody who can contribute to that conversation, please hit us up or email nanyouthhuddle@gmail.com. It's a very, very important conversation. We had it with Councilman King earlier today, and we want to continue it on our platform. Thank you all. Love y'all all. See y'all in DC, and see y'all next week. Later. Thank you again, Kyra.